Steve Quarry, Head of Education and Training at the European Training Academy in Belgrade, Serbia, and I shall now describe the Strength2Food Meal Planner, an Excel tool developed specifically to meet the needs of schools that we're working with in Serbia. But first, I need to give a bit of background information to explain why this tool was developed. Unlike most European countries, the large majority of primary schools in Serbia that give meals to their children, they have to carry out their own food procurement. So each year the school has to tender for its year's supply of food, either as ready-made meals provided externally or as food ingredients for the school to make its own meals. On the Strength2Food project, we're working only with schools that make their own meals. Another difference between Serbian primary schools and those of many other European countries is that schools here can provide any combination of up to 4 meals per day. So breakfast, morning snack, lunch and afternoon snack. Now, although kindergartens have their own nutritionists who advise on meal composition to ensure nutritional balance, very few primary schools have nutritionists, so maintaining a suitable nutritional balance for their meals is challenging. And most meal recipes are put together either according to the cook's experience or recipes from the era when schools could afford nutritionists, and these recipes are just copy-pasted from one year to the next. So the nutritional quality of most school meals is, or at least was, unknown. Because of this, in September 2018, the Ministry of Education in Serbia introduced the country's first regulations governing the nutritional quality of primary school meals, with recommendations on macro and nutrient quantities per day. So this Excel meal planner has been developed specifically for these schools to give them information on the nutritional quality of their meals, the cost of each meal, and to take advantage of Strength2Food's findings on the level of food plate waste in Serbian schools, as well as CO2 emissions during food production. The meal planner also uses plate waste to calculate the typical nutritional intake from each meal, which means how much the children actually eat, as well as the meal's carbon footprint. So let's move on to demonstrate how the meal planner works. And just a moment while I set up screen sharing so you can see the Excel spreadsheets. So here we have the meal planner. As you can see at the bottom, it has 7 spreadsheets: instructions, ingredient prices, meal entry week 1, week 2, charts and graphs, recommendations, and finally the quantities of food items. And it starts with some general background information here, sources of information that are used by the software, spreadsheet information, and then instructions on meal entry, followed by explanation of the outputs that are provided by the meal planner. Let's go now to ingredient prices. These are entered by the school, and in brown, the columns here, these come directly from the procurement documentation, and in grey, those columns come from the contract from the supplier. Here we have nice foods in Cyrillic Serbian, which are converted into English by the software in the meal planner on the left-hand side. The total quantities during the year are here on the right-hand side, and prices, unit prices without VAT, the rate of VAT with VAT, and total prices for the year. So let's move on to entering the food for each of the meals now. So here we have meal entry for week 1, and a number of columns that the school has to fill in. The first over here is a description of the meal that is provided for the parent. The next one here is the number of children that are provided with that particular meal. So let's say 100 children. Then a description of the meal courses, for example, soup, toast, or whatever. Then the next one is selecting the food category. And you can see from the drop-down list here that we have various food categories. Let's select vegetables. And then once that's been selected, you can select a particular vegetable, let's say white cabbage. And finally, you enter the weight for that particular ingredient. And on the right-hand column, you'll see it is now calculated in kilograms, the total weight of cabbage that's required for that particular meal. So that's for breakfast. Then we have over here snack 1 in the morning and lunch, and finally snack 2 in the afternoon. Then we move on to Tuesday, and after Tuesday, as you might expect, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So that's the first week, and it's exactly the same for week 2. Here you see we start off with breakfast and so on. So let's now move on to the charts and graphs. So once all the meal ingredients have been entered, then you get some output. And the first page of outputs is shown here. And up at the top, you can select week 1 or week 2. So this is at the moment week 1. You can also select the conventional vegetable prices or organic vegetable prices. Here we have a table of some basic information on the nutrients, macronutrients and micronutrients. This is the amount given to the children in actual milligrams or grams. Then we have the recommended quantity according to the ministry's instructions. And then finally, taking account of plate waste, and you can see the average for this day of typical food waste is around 27%. So that information is now taking account of the plate waste. So then we have bar charts. The first bar chart is the total that's given to the children for lunch as a percent of recommended in the ministry guidelines. The second is the lunch that's actually eaten by the children, again, percent recommended. Then we've got at the bottom here some more charts. Here we have cumulative costs of the food categories per meal. So that's the cost in green of vegetables. Yellow is fruit. Then we have blue is fresh meat and so on. Here we have the total weight that's given. And on the right-hand side, this is the CO2 emissions for each of the food ingredients. Moving down to the pie charts at the bottom, this is now breaking down each meal into its food categories. So here we have the total cost of vegetables, cost of fruit, the cost of fresh meat. Over here we have the weight of vegetables per meal, the weight of fruit per meal, the weight of meat per meal, and on the right-hand side, their equivalents in CO2 emissions. So this is week 1. I can now change this to week 2, and you'll see the results of entering the data for week 2. These are for lunch, and this is the amount of vegetables and the cost of vegetables at conventional prices. If I now change to organic, you'll see that the cost of the vegetables will go up. So here we now have the cost for the vegetables. So that's that chart. Let's move on to the next one, recommendations. Again, we have the table of values on the left-hand side, but on the right-hand side, you can now see information on recommendations and information for the children and for the school and their parents on what they've been eating. So at the top, it summarizes basic information on the main ingredients for the meals. And here it says there is insufficient calories per day, insufficient carbohydrates, insufficient protein, insufficient fat, but sufficient fiber in the meals. Then after that general information, here you can see some cells are in shades of red. That indicates that those particular minerals over here or vitamins down here, they are deficient for that particular meal. So where they are deficient, I've provided a list of the major foods which are high in those minerals or vitamins so that either the school cook or the parents can supplement the children's diet with those extra ingredients to overcome any weaknesses in the nutrients. We have further details down here of different types of information for the parents. And finally, we have individual meals. This is breakfast, morning snacks, recommended lunches, and then finally for each day of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so on. The final spreadsheet is information on the quantities of food that have been used for week 1 and also for week 2. So this is the ranked ingredients and their quantities in kilograms or liters, the number of units that the school has bought, the unit measure, VAT, so this is the price plus VAT. This is the total cost of that. This is the lot. In this case, these are pastries from one supplier, and then lot 2 is everything else from another supplier. So that's week 1, and that is week 2. So that is a brief overview of the Excel meal planner, and from this demonstration, you can see that the meal planner tool is very different in its concept and operation from the meal analyzer that was described a few minutes earlier, though in many respects the two are complementary. So that's it, and thanks for watching.